all. Good evening, depending on your time zone, and good morning, depending on your time zone. Thanks a lot for joining this event. My name is Roxana Sami, and I have the honor and pleasure of being your moderator today. Now, as you know, IFAD has just launched its new evaluation manual, which has been jointly developed with Ifad Management and the Independent Office of Evaluation. This resource truly benefits from theory and practice of evaluation with a special focus on the Sustainable Development Goals, and as such serves as a reference for all development practitioners who wish to undertake evaluations. The manual aims to equip IFAD management and partners not only to undertake industry best practice self-evaluations, but also to have a better understanding of evaluation criteria and how these can be applied to the 2030 agenda. Now, we have an exciting and packed afternoon in front of us, so allow me to get a few housekeeping items out of the way. Just a reminder, we are recording the event, and let me walk you quickly through the agenda. We'll start by hearing introductory remarks from Indra Naidu, the Director of the Independent Office of Evaluation, followed by Nigel Brett, who will be delivering the remarks on behalf of Donald Brown, IFAD Associate Vice President for Program Management Department. After which our evaluation colleagues will be presenting the 2022 IFAD Evaluation Manual. And then we will have a panel discussion with distinguished panelists from government, academia, international financial institution, and multilateral agencies. We'll then open the floor for questions and comments. I kindly ask you to use the Q&A feature to pose your questions, and we'll be fielding them after the panel discussion. To close the event, Sarah Savastano, Director of Research and Impact Assessment Division at IFAD, and Indra Naidu will deliver closing remarks. So with the agenda out of the way, we're going to get started in earnest. May I now ask Indra Naidu, Director of the Independent Office of Evaluation, to deliver his introductory remarks. Indra, over to you.
Thank you very much, Roxanne. Dear participants, I am pleased to welcome you to the seminar, which is part of the gLOCAL Week of 2022. The seminar is co-organized by the Independent Office of Evaluation of IFAD and IFAD Management, represented by the Program Management Department and the Strategy and Knowledge Department. The seminar is dedicated to the 2020 Evaluation Manual of IFAD, finalized in this year. For the first time, IFAD has an evaluation manual that has been co-produced by the Independent Office of Evaluation and IFAD Management and establishes key principles and common approaches for both. We expect that the common standards will enhance the quality of self and independent evaluation and consistency between the two, and ultimately foster a stronger results and evaluation culture at IFAD. While the manual has been conceived for IFAD staff and consultants, I am confident that it will be of interest to many rural development practitioners and evaluators outside IFAD who may be working in a government, in an international organization, in an NGO, civil society organizations, or in a private sector company. The manual provides guidance on how to adapt international standards, practices, and evaluation criteria into the context of rural development, particularly when the end client of development interventions are smallholder farmer and small rural producers. The manual draws from the recent contributions of evaluation theory and practice, and with special reference to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Examples of these concepts that the manual addresses are complexity and systems thinking, transformative change, sustainability and climate change, social justice, and gender intersectionality. The evaluation manual is now available on the website of our office, and we have translated the manual into 3 official IFAD languages, Arabic, French, and Spanish. These versions will be available soon. We are also preparing an online training module on this manual, and we expect to launch in the summer of 2022. All this material will be available online to the public and free of charge. I take the opportunity to thank representatives from IFAD Management, notably Mr. Donald Brown, Associate Vice President, Program Management Department, and Dr. Joe Puri, Associate Vice President, Strategy and Knowledge Department, for their support to the initiative. Within my office, from IOE side, special thanks go to Fabrizio Faloni, Deputy Director, and Simona Soma, Evaluation Officer, for leading the production of the document, and to the Evaluation Communication Unit for helping with the design of the final document and for their support in organizing this event. I also thank the panelists of today who will help animate the debate. Ms. Chitra Deshpande from the Program Management Department of IFAD, Mr. Alisher Shukurov from the Ministry of Agriculture of Uzbekistan, Ms. Paula Silva Vivaniu, Monitoring and Evaluation Consultant, Ms. Maya Vijaya Raghavan, Independent Evaluation Department, Asian Development Bank, Ms. Megan Kennedy, Head of the Evaluation Unit, OECD DAC. With this, I thank you for your attendance, wish you a good discussion, and I am pleased to give the floor to Roxanne Sami, the event moderator, and then to Nigel Brett on behalf of Donald Brown, the Program Management Department, IFAD. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Indran, for those remarks and for setting the context and giving a comprehensive overview for what this event is all about. It's a pleasure to give the floor now to Nigel Brett, Director of Operational Policy and Result Division at IFAD, who will be delivering remarks on behalf of Donald Brown, IFAD Associate Vice President for Program Management Department, who unfortunately, because of a conflict in his calendar, is unable to attend this event. Nigel, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues, rural development practitioners, evaluators. Great to see your faces on the screen, to meet you virtually, to be part of this session today. It's a very important event on the new IFAD Evaluation Manual. And as you heard, I'm here on behalf of Donald Brown. He sends his apologies. He was called away at short notice. Donald is the IFAD Management focal point to independent evaluation, representing the management side. I would like first to highlight that there is a very productive collaboration that management has had with IOE on evaluation topics and deliverables over the past few years. We have improved quite significantly our coordination, our knowledge sharing, and the contributions to one another's programs and products. And at the same time, of course, we have maintained the mutual independence, the separate roles, as per our separate mandates. And for the very first time, IFAD has developed an evaluation manual that applies to both self-evaluation, but also independent evaluation. And this marks a significant shift in our approach compared to the past. The focus has changed from the evaluation itself, which we consider as a means to reach our mandate, towards IFAD's overall development effectiveness, which we consider the purpose of our mission, the impact of IFAD on the livelihoods of poor rural people. And the manual shows how self and independent evaluation are very much complementary and mutually reinforcing, as stated clearly in the evaluation policy, which was approved by the board in 2021, which was developed jointly. IOE and management, of course, provide useful inputs to the agenda and work plan of each other. For management, the selection of the IOE product mix and their delivery timeline is absolutely critical, and it allows us to base our strategic products. So things like corporate action plans or country strategies with the evidence and the findings stemming from evaluation. And that synchronicity of approaches with the IOE products, with the learning from the IOE products feeding into the new management products is absolutely key. So we close that learning loop. Moreover, both parties collaborate and exchange strategic views and information to enhance the relevance and the quality of products. And this enhances the country team's ownership over the recommendations stemming from IOE evaluations. And it also it also increases the uptake and improves the uptake of these recommendations. From management's perspective, learning is absolutely key. It's a key element in the manual. And as highlighted in the recently updated Development Effectiveness Framework, which went to the board in last December, so 5 months ago, learning is really a key priority in the IFAD 12 business model. IFAD staff, the government partners, the beneficiaries need to be able to draw on evidence easily to design better, to implement better, to ensure we have a better impact on the ground. And by adopting a common set of criteria between the management products and the products from independent evaluation, the evaluation function benefits from two different but complementary perspectives. Moreover, the manual reinforces the continuous exchange on evaluation products, as well as the numerous opportunities for discussion and for dissemination. The evaluation manual is the reference point for self-evaluation products developed by management. In particular, if I look at what's happening this year, we have an update to our project completion guidelines, and these will reflect a shared assessment criteria and key evaluation questions with the IOE PCRV questions. So self-evaluation tools for project design and implementation will be consistent, 100% consistent with these guiding principles. And the same applies to country level tools, such as the guidelines for designing and evaluating country strategies, which we're currently updating. In this regard, it's important to note that while part 1 of the manual is finished, we have part 2 of the manual, which is currently being finalized. And this will include an overview of the key elements in IFAD self-evaluation products, such as the impact assessments at corporate level, which you will hear Sarah talk about later on, the country strategy completion reviews at country level, the project completion reports, which are done at project level, and the updated guidelines will be reflected in part 2 of the evaluation manual. So it's a living document. It's going to be updated in real time as these products come online. We really see this as absolutely critical, this idea of a dynamic operational context and the idea of the manual being a living document. And management and IOE may update sections when the new manual tools become available to ensure consistency with our commitments and action plans. But the core principles, the methodological guidance and the standards, they will remain unchanged in time. I just want to conclude by reiterating our view that self and independent evaluation are very much complementary, mutually reinforcing. We look forward to the continuing fruitful collaboration with IOE. We expect that exchanging strategic views and information will enhance the relevance, but also the quality of evaluation products, and ultimately will boost the transformational impact on poor rural people. So with that, let me close my opening statement and pass back to you, Roxy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. And I think now you've really excited everybody, and everybody now wants to know, what is this manual all about? So we now move to our next segment, and may I now give the floor to Fabrizio Felloni, Deputy Director of the Independent Office of Evaluation, and Simona Somma, Lead Evaluation Officer, to present the 2022 IFAD Evaluation Manual. The floor is over to you, guys.
Thank you very much, Roxy. And I hope you can see the slide and hear my voice. Absolutely,
Fabrizio.
Thank you very much. And so, dear participants, let me just, together with the colleague Simona Somma, with whom we worked and in collaboration with management of IFAD on this manual, let us give you a brief outline of what is in the manual. So first of all, let me just answer the quick question: where do we find the manual? It's in the webpage of the conference today. It's also on the chat. But if you want a brief reference where you can find it, here it is in this slide. So this one will give you access to the manual also after this meeting, the meeting of today. Let me say that in the past, IFAD had other evaluation manuals, but for the first time, this one is a manual that is been produced in collaboration between independent evaluation and management. Before, it was only prepared by independent evaluation and for independent evaluation. And second, it covers, as we said, both self and independent evaluation. So to be used by both management and IOE. Of course, it has been an opportunity preparing this manual to upgrade our guidance according to the latest and contemporary approaches to evaluation. So we'll say also something about this in the later slides. Of course, preparing this manual, we have to think about our organization, but we hope really that the principles that are there can be useful also and can be translated in other organizational contexts as well. And in general, can be used some of the principles for evaluation, and particularly for rural development. As you see, the manual will have two parts. What we are presenting today is part one, which is general principle methodology. Part two is more guidance on individual evaluation products, both products of independent office of evaluation and products that management use for self-evaluation. Again, here, this will be available to the public, so they might be useful as an example to be referred to and maybe to inspire some work in other organizations as well. It's a living electronic document. We will also prepare a set of references and videos that can be used to, for example, access more information, even training on some methodological features that we present in the manual. And we're also, we have a prototype now, web-based training module, which we hope to make available soon to the general public, and not only to IFAD staff, but to the general public as soon as possible. And the manual has been translated in the 4 IFAD official language, Arabic, so Arabic, English, French, and Spanish. So we hope they will be available soon online. The structure of the manual, as you can see, again, it caters to users at IFAD, starting with chapter 1, where you have an introduction to rural evaluation. But for example, chapter 1 also contains principles for evaluation and ethical guidelines, which are of broader interest and application in the development community, the evaluation community. Likewise, chapter 2 shows the IFAD evaluation architecture and some processes through which evaluation can lead to better knowledge and learning. So this is also can be relevant when transposed to other organizational context. And then chapter 3 contains the methodological fundamentals. So this perhaps is of more broadest interest for many other readers. So we look at several approaches and perspectives and concepts such as theory-based approaches to evaluation, complexity and system thinking, transformative change, social justice, intersectionality, and culturally responsive evaluation. What we also do in this chapter, we adopt and adapt the international criteria for evaluation to the IFAD context. So we play them out in the specific context where we operate, so rural development. And finally, we have also some discussion on the information and communication technology for evaluation. And this will be taken up by my colleague Simona in one of the next slides. Let me just say that some of the 2030 agenda was an important source of inspiration of for what we have in the manual, and some of the approaches perhaps are not entirely new, but they obtain prominence through the 2030 agenda. Some of the approaches that we present in our manual. You will see, for example, some discussion in the manual on transformative change and the implication it has for evaluation. Complexity and system thinking is another example. And other examples that you'll find in the manual is sustainability and climate resilience, and social justice, which is linked to the principle no one left behind. Let me say that what the manual does is not provide extensive description of each of these perspective and concept, but rather give a definition, an example how it can be operationalized, and then further reference as to where you can find further information to the methodology and how it has been applied. We are also planning to make available to the public a dedicated website in our webpage of IOE, Independent Evaluation at IFAD, where you can also find some further reference, even videos, some of which we have produced ourselves on some of these topics. So that's to give you a sense of how the manual is structured. Perhaps at this stage, I can give now the floor to my colleague Simona for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Fabrizio. The next slides will take us through the core of Chapter 3, the methodological fundamentals of the manual, and in particular, I will be outlining the 4 key steps of the evaluation design. So let us start from the first one, which, Fabrizio, please, if you can move to the next slide. The first key steps in the evaluation design consist in defining the scope of the evaluation.
Simona, you went on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Fabrizio, can you please move the slide? Oh, thank you so much. So I was saying that the first step of the evaluation design, defining the scope of the evaluation, consists in defining the scope of the evaluation, in establishing the key themes, the key evaluation questions, and the chronological coverage. Next, which concerns step 2. In this step, we do determine what the evaluation intends to achieve. Evaluators in this stage define the theory of change and the analytical lenses that will be applied and how stakeholders will be engaged in the evaluation process. The figure in front of you is the design triangle by Stern, which pinpoints to the 3 key factors to be taken into account when selecting the evaluation design. So the first one is the evaluation questions and the criteria, the characteristic of the evaluand, and the range of available designs. With regard to the last point, the evaluation designs, there are a set of principles that at IFAD we apply in selecting the design. The next slide, please. So the overarching principle is that at IFAD evaluations are theory-based. And along with this overarching principle, there are 5 core elements that apply to all evaluations. So all type of evaluations are based on a theory of change that explains the theory of a given intervention, and then the evaluation is designed to test that theory. One of the key principles recalls the design triangle by Stern. If you look at the first point in the slide, matching evaluation design to the purpose of the evaluation, to the evaluation questions, and to the nature of the intervention. Second very important point is that at IFAD, we do assess the contribution of IFAD operations, but we also try to go a step further, and we aim at assessing also the attribution of on-the-ground results to IFAD operations. We do apply a mixed methods approach. This means that we do mix qualitative and quantitative methods for analytical rigor and depth. We do adopt a participatory and culturally responsive approach. This means that we try to keep cultural responsiveness at the center of the evaluation. And this is key to broadening participation and incorporating culture and context into the evaluation. Along the same lines, we do pay attention to adopting an integrated gender focus and in applying gender intersectionality and an equity lens in all evaluations. Next, please. Evaluation criteria. This is one of the core part of Chapter 3 of the manual. At IFAD, we do adopt the international OECD standard criteria for project level evaluations, so relevance, effectiveness, efficiency, impact, and sustainability, along with IFAD specific evaluation criteria, which are gender equality and women empowerment and performance of partners. At the country level, we add the coherence criterion to the previous ones. So we will have the international criteria, the IFAD specific criteria, plus coherence. Next, please. I'm now moving to step 3 of the evaluation design, reviewing availability and data availability. So we are in the step where the availability assessment is actually performed. The availability assessment is a very important phase of the evaluation design because it provides an assessment of what can be analyzed, of the type of information available, and of the missing gaps. I will now move to the final slide of this presentation, which concerns the data collection methods. So at IFAD, of course, we pay attention to innovation, to use ICT in evaluation. When we do use ICT in evaluation, we are very careful in the way we use it, meaning that we pay attention to the fact that the interest of the target groups is actually at the center of the ICT use. We pay attention to inclusiveness, meaning that we try to make sure that vulnerable groups, women, youth, and so on and so forth, are actually included. We do also pay attention to protecting privacy and following ethical guidelines, and as I mentioned earlier, also to mixing methods. So on the right-hand side of the slide, you see a list of data collection tools such as the GIS, big data, and so on and so forth. One important point that I want to highlight is that it is important to innovate. It is important to use ICT in evaluation, especially when, as we saw during these years, right, during the pandemic, when we conduct evaluation remotely. At the same time, it is very important to make sure that these innovative methods are actually used in combination with more traditional methods. I'll stop here and give back the floor to Roxana. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues, for that very comprehensive presentation, and which I hope has also set the stage for a lively and inspiring conversation. Now, today we are indeed very, very lucky to have high-level government representation along with our key development partners, member of academia, and IFAD colleagues for this panel discussion. I remind you to pose your questions in the Q&A section. We'll be fielding it at the end of the discussion, of the panel discussion. A warm welcome to our panelists, which I will introduce as they take the floor. I want to kick off the conversation with a question to Paula Silva Villanueva, a monitoring and evaluation consultant, climate resilience and international development, and also a visiting scholar at the University of Dueso in Bilbao. Now, Paula, as someone who contributed to this manual, what are the topics you deem are new and groundbreaking? And how do you think the development community can put these to use and benefit from them?
Thanks, Roxana. Not an easy question at all. Hi, everyone. Greetings from Barcelona. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Let me start by thanking the IFAD team for giving me the opportunity to work with them on this manual. I think my own experience maybe answers the question, because it was very enriching, not just because of the content that Fabrizio and Simona just shared, and the concepts and methods that it provides and presents. But also I think that what it offered us is to think as evaluators on how can we engage with the magnitude, the complexity, and the speed of transformation that is needed in today's world. And I think that's for me as an evaluator, a key takeaway from the manual. And I think it does it not just by providing, the frameworks or the definitions or concepts, but also by providing us not only references, but also examples on how can we actually engage with that complexity, because the traditional box in many instances does not fit the challenge and the answers that as evaluators we need to provide. So that was also a key takeaway from me, not only the theoretical thinking behind it, but the actual grounding it in practice. And it provides a lot of references to latest publications and materials and examples where one can go and actually see how somebody has actually done it in practice. So that's, I think, very appreciated and very useful. Another feature that I haven't seen yet in other manuals is the way IFAD frames gender equality and women empowerment from an evaluation perspective. And again, it requests us to think beyond the traditional box and to engage with the concept of intersectionality, and therefore requests evaluators to understand more holistically the multiple roots of vulnerability and the extent to which interventions are actually, addressing the main causes holistically and not in isolation. Similarly, with cultural responsive evaluations and also tools and methods, again, I insist, I think it's the practical elements of the manual that really brings it to life. I think it requests us as evaluators to be more critical or aware of our role as an evaluator in the field in a particular country, to what extent we are contributing to perhaps discrimination or not supporting communities and hearing the voices that as evaluators we need to hear. So again, it's a request to go a step further in that regard. And maybe more important, or more, from a more philosophical perspective, it also asks us to think about the role of evaluation in promoting social justice, just by the way, we conduct our own practice. So I think that the points I'm sharing, I was thinking about it before joining today, and I think that maybe even if implicitly, because the core of the manual, as Simona mentioned, is on the criteria. And again, how do we apply that criteria in practice? How do we apply methods in practice? How do we engage with a complex world? But I think what underpins the whole manual is that it's about rethinking the role of evaluation in today's world, and provide learning and evidence that is meaningful and actionable in support to global system change. And I think that's the challenge ahead for all of us. And I think that the manual is a great resource and tool to do that. And I think I'm going to stop here.
Thank you very much, Paula. I think you highlighted, this importance that the manual has these practical elements, which is not theoretical, but really grounded in practice. The fact that, it highlights the role of evaluation and evaluators to promote social justice. And, one of the things that is IFAD's strength, the gender equality and empowerment, and it makes you understand this more holistically. Thank you. I think those are very, very salient points of this manual, and there are many more. But these are These are a very good starting point. So thank you for that. So let me now go to Chitra, Lead Advisor, Results and Resourcing Operation Policy and Results Division at IFAD. So Chitra, Paula just outlined these new and groundbreaking topics of the manual. And I think at IFAD also, we know that one of the innovations of this manual is the fact that it's a joint IFAD Management and the Independent Office of Evaluation product. Now, with all of this in mind, how would you say the manual can contribute to improve both self and independent evaluation, and at the same time enhance the interaction with our development partners?
Thanks so much, Roxy. What a great question. Another tough question, right? So, I mean, self and independent evaluation, as Nigel said, are mutually reinforcing. You could say they're two sides to the same coin. You know, each provides a different yet complementary perspective to the other's findings. We're both evaluating the IFAD's project interventions to ensure that they're improving the lives of rural poor people. So now self and independent evaluation, as was presented or also by Fabrizio, they build upon and feed into each other. You know, just on a personal note, as a former independent evaluator, I can personally attest to the importance of good evidence presented in self-evaluation, and in terms of their usage in an independent evaluation. And now in management, I appreciate the validated findings and the insights of independent evaluation for new project designs and country strategies. So the IFAD Evaluation Manual really provides us with a shared approach, and more importantly, shared language, especially through the common definition of the criteria for assessing our development intervention. And in this way, the manual helps us really improve the overall quality of our evaluations. We're not evaluating apples and oranges. You know, previously we had a definition for scaling up, and one was potentially scaling up, and one was evidence that you were actually scaling up. And we were really, in a sense, evaluating different things and not speaking to one another. And so, you know, in having this shared approach and also having this shared outline or coordination, you know, we're improving our coordination on the evaluation products and their timelines, because timing is critical for utility, so that they can be, independent evaluations can be used effectively by us in management. The alignment, again, on evaluation criteria gives a consistent feedback to our government partners, as well as to our staff and development partners for better project design and implementation. And the coordination on the development and review of each evaluation product is also important, because it ensures that it brings each of our contributions to enhance the quality of IFAD's interventions. The manual enhances interaction with development partners as well, because it brings clarity, as I said before, and consistencies to IFAD's evaluation function. You know, often governments are saying, there's what, you've already done an evaluation, now there's another. And so it brings clarity. Yes, you know, we both come in at different points, and we're evaluating you on the same criteria. And it highlights also our collaboration between management and IOE, while still respecting our mutual independence. The alignment, again, as mentioned in the presentation, with the international criteria and standards also supports our client governments, who are our development partners on the ground, who are working with multiple UN agencies and international financial institutions. So they'll be able to engage with project completion reviews and later the independent evaluation with a clear understanding of the evidence and data required and approaches to demonstrate their development effectiveness. And also, you know, they'll be reporting to other agencies, as mentioned. And so at least they have a consistent evidence base that they can share. The improved alignment with international standards also allows our self and independent evaluations to contribute to the global knowledge of learning on various thematic topics such as climate or gender. One was a past evaluation, now an upcoming one. So other partners, as other development banks, as well as academia and other partners of that sort. So this is valuable to our various development partners who are interested in identifying best practices to strengthen their own development effectiveness. So thanks so much for that question. Over.
Thank you, Chitra. And indeed, yes, the goal of evaluation, be it self or independent, is to improve the lives of the people that we work for and we work with. And thank you for highlighting the importance of good evidence, which then helps good evaluation. I'm sure Sarah will talk about this later in her closing remarks. And I do believe that this, as a communicator, I do believe this shared language and approach that you have will help everybody to have a common vocabulary and therefore be able to communicate more effectively in everything that you do. And you, Chitra, gave me really the perfect segue to the next question, which I would like to ask Alisher Shukurov, Senior Advisor to the Minister of Agriculture of Uzbekistan and Director of the International Center for Food and Agriculture and Strategic Development Research. So, Mr. Shukurov, following where Chitra left, I hope you would agree that the litmus test for the successful rollout of any manual is how effectively it will be used by the intended audience, and in this case, by our partners on the ground. So would you be kind enough to tell us how do you see the manual equipping you and your team to address the challenges that you're facing in terms of data collection and data availability? And more broadly speaking, how do you intend to build a national data collection and monitoring capacity?
Thank you. Can you hear me well? Great. First of all, thank you very much for inviting this very important event. And it is very timely, particularly for Uzbekistan. Now we have dynamic reforms are going on in the agri-food sector, and we are really visiting or assessing our current programs and projects, how effectively really we are implementing the programs and projects in the agri-food sector. And I'll do my best to share with you some of our experience, particularly relevant with today's topic. First of all, we have approved agriculture development strategy in 2019. And one of the central topic in the agriculture development strategy, we considered the rural development is the key. And we need to shift from purely focusing the technical agriculture programs to more broader rural development programs and projects. So this is really new area that we are exploring in the agri-food sector, that central focus will be in our programs and projects to support the rural development, and particularly to support the smallholders and communities that they need to get the support. And this also gives us to really reestablish our current systems, particularly to measure our programs and projects, how effectively we are supporting, we are implementing our strategies and programs. And with this, we understood that we need to shift. We understood, we have several justifications that project-based evaluation, monitoring evaluation system should be really moved to more broader institutional-based evaluation system. With this respect, Uzbekistan, Minister of Agriculture, we have established a new center, just to mention that Center for Strategic Development and Research. And our center is responsible for the implementation of projects, which is around $3 billion funded by IFIs. And the challenge is that, as I mentioned earlier, the project-based evaluation monitoring system a bit isolated. which we understood that not much link it with our broader programs and projects, broader strategies. And as I mentioned also earlier, that the rural development currently is the key focus for our strategies. And what is the next steps? To begin this process of gradual rural transformation, we need to start with the basics. This is why we are now in the process of establishing a dedicated 2 units. One is the M&E unit, and the second is the rural development units. And these units are very key to work together in terms of data collection and collation initially. And we need to build up this capacity to guide the future rural development planning and programming that must follow. We anticipate that these units will also be responsible for designing, undertaking, outsourcing, monitoring, evaluating, and coordinating rural research activities as well. And practically, what is our actions? Our future aim is to gradually establish an integrated rural monitoring system aimed at improving the collection, collation, and dissemination of relevant information on all rural areas of Uzbekistan, including data on rural demographics, incomes, employment, access to services, organizational structures, and other relevant data. As the capacities of this, as I mentioned earlier, units expands, we intend to provide support for the analysis of regional and local rural development strategies and programs aimed at supporting and protecting rural communities, diversifying rural incomes, improving the quality of life in rural areas, and empowering local rural communities to support the development of their local areas. This anticipates to include the design, development, and piloting of targeted rural development support projects and schemes to support the establishment and development of non-agriculture enterprises, mobilization of existing capacity of neighborhoods, we call it mahallas, development of public-private partnership between citizens, agriculture businesses, civil society, institutions, and state bodies. All these steps will ultimately contribute to the development of draft national rural development programs and plans, which we are now working closely with the Ministry of Economy. So when considering the IFAD Rural Development Evaluation Manual, this provides us with an opportunity to learn from best practices and to structure these new systems in the best possible ways. But we also recognize our limitations. This whole area, as I mentioned earlier, the rural development in the agri-food sector is the new for Uzbekistan, and we will not be successful introducing rural development as a concept in Uzbekistan unless we have international technical partners to guide and support us on this journey. So we welcome this initiative and hope that we can explore in more depth the opportunities to work more closely on these issues with IFAD and the other development partners to turn the manual and its guidance into practical systems and practices. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shukurov. And I hope that indeed your newly M&E and rural development unit sections, offices can benefit greatly from this manual, and you managed to use this valuable resource to build their capacity to establish your integrated M&E, where you can, have data and then also evidence. So next time Simona and her team come to do the evaluation, you make their jobs easier as well. Now, before going to the next panelist, may I remind the audience to use the Q&A section to pose your questions. So for those of you who have your hands raised, kindly use that feature to pose your questions. So I'm not going to go to Megan Kennedy, who is the head of the evaluation unit at OECD DAC, the Development Cooperation Directorate. Megan, you just heard Mr. Shukurov outlining how they're planning to use the manual. Now, as a seasoned evaluator, what do you think may be the challenges in applying the revised evaluation criteria, and how would you suggest overcoming these?
Great, thank you, Roxana, and thank you to all of the colleagues. It's lovely to see your attendance, and congratulations on the manual. I just wanted to start out by saying that, the thing that I love the most about this manual and the approach to IFAD's current thinking on evaluation is this idea of evaluation and evaluative thinking not being only the responsibility of the evaluation unit. And I want to apply that same logic to the criteria. I think a lot of excitement and energy has been spent within the evaluation community about the criteria. And what I would love to see is even more attention to how we can use the criteria outside of evaluation as a way to encourage all of us to ask the right questions about what we're funding, what we're implementing, what programs we're involved in. And I think Simona made some very good points about evaluability. And that's where we see so many challenges around evaluation methodologies, and evaluability can be in part addressed if we incorporate the criteria earlier on. So that's one thing I really like about the approach and this idea of a shared responsibility for evaluation and improvement of results, improvement of our understanding of our effectiveness, which can ultimately improve the lives of the people for whom the IFAD works. So I want to just highlight 3 challenges. There are many more, of course, and there are also many challenges that are sort of related to evaluation in a more general sense. So what I've tried to focus on today is just the challenges most specifically related to the criteria. And again, the colleagues have already mentioned many other important points. So the first is around the concept of the criteria and the words that we use for them. So I don't mean the idea of what is a criteria, but I mean the word of relevance. You'll see on our website, I shared the link, we have now versions in several different languages. I'm sorry, Alishar, we don't yet have a version in Uzbek, but maybe we can work on that together. And these concepts, my experience really is that they're very universal, but the words that people use for the concepts are very different. And especially when you're talking about individuals who are not professional evaluators, whether those are program staff, whether those are the intended beneficiaries in communities, or the people who are not receiving a project, for example, who are not benefiting from a program. So what I would like to invite evaluators and evaluation commissioners and managers to do is to address this challenge of sort of the concepts, that the concepts are often there, but they're often hidden by the way people think about the words. So if the evaluators come in with using these words, relevance, effectiveness, impact, and throwing them around, it can be actually very alienating. And the result is that you exclude people and their truth and their understanding from the evaluation process, which is the exact opposite of what we should be doing. So what I would like to invite evaluators to do is to listen first. And don't start with the words of relevance or impact, but start by listening to what people care about, meet them where they are. And then sometimes it's helpful to reflect back to them and say, what you are asking about whether what the government is funding is the most useful thing in your village, that's a great question. And we often call that question a question of relevance. And sometimes that can really help to make sure that your meaning that you're bringing as an outside evaluator, an independent evaluator in the case of an independent evaluation, actually reflects the reality of people who are being affected. Sometimes I would even say, don't even use the word relevance. Just don't use it. There's no reason you have to use the word. I guess there was some view, maybe at some point the IOE would come and knock you on the wrist if you had misused the word. But I think, that can be addressed in other ways, but we shouldn't feel that we're stuck with having to say, we've ticked off the box of all 6 criteria and we've used these terms. Use the terms that make sense to people. And that's related to a second challenge, which is around depth versus breadth. And I think this also relates to some of the questions around transformational change. So with 6 criteria, but also with the cross-cutting focus and the key principles that IFAD has defined in the manual, there's a real challenge of how can we ask all of these questions, which all may be very important, and not end up with something which in my country we call a mile wide and an inch deep. So you have a very superficial analysis across many different criteria and many different questions. And the way I would suggest to address that challenge is really be disciplined and focused on what is the value add. We don't have endless resources for evaluation. The resources we spend on evaluation are resources we could be spending on direct program impact if we had good programs that were having an impact. So be selective. There's no reason to evaluate relevance every single time. If that question has been answered and it feels that has a good answer that is not contested, then choose to focus your evaluation somewhere else. And then I'd like to bring the third challenge, which is really around who owns the evaluation and who gets to determine not only what questions we ask, which is of course the purpose of the criteria to help us ask the right questions, but really the issue of answering those questions from multiple perspectives. And I think this is where we see the new criteria really try to bring in this more nuanced approach to saying, you know, don't be so naive as to think that everybody involved in a particular intervention has the same view on relevance, because they won't. And so if you have this very tick box exercise to relevance and say, yes, we found it somewhere in an IFAD policy document online, so it must be relevant to IFAD. And also the government of Uzbekistan happened to mention something related to this topic somewhere in their Sustainable Development Goals national strategy. So we call it relevant. You know, it's very high level. But even you have to look at not only different stakeholders, but also the perception of trade-offs between who gets a voice and who gets to say what's most relevant to them. And I think we've seen that, you know, with COVID-19, for example, it's a great example where different stakeholders have different views on what should be prioritized at a given moment. And those are not easy decisions to make. So I think this is where we see that evaluation is about power. It's about values. It's not simply about measuring how many widgets we've produced and whether that was worth the dollars that we spent. So that element of values, and that there are not always easy solutions. And if you have very clean, easy findings to your evaluation, you might be doing something wrong. So that's just, those are the three thoughts that came to my mind. And thanks again for having me today.
Thank you very much, Megan. That was really excellent. Yes, I mean, this whole thing that, you know, listen first and don't use the words, even though, you know, we try to give this common vocabulary, but use terms that make sense. And my takeaway from your intervention was this caution of the depth and breadth and the superficial analysis, and to figure out what is the value added, and be selective. And I think as development workers, perhaps that's the hardest thing for all of us, because we want to cover all grounds, and we are on the side of not perhaps being selective always. But thank you. That was absolutely superb. Now, we're lucky enough to have a valued development partner with us in the person of Maya Vijayaragavan. I know I messed it up, so my apologies. Methods Advisor, Independent Evaluation of the Asian Development Bank. Now, Maya, I know that the ADB doesn't have an evaluation manual per se, but you guys have a series of guidelines which are tailored for your different product types. So, can you please tell us how these guidelines have helped you to improve the quality of your evaluations? And what would be 3 nuggets from the IFAD Evaluation Manual which you think you'll be using in your future evaluations?
Thank you, Roxy. And thanks to the other panelists. I think I may skip some of the things that I plan to say because they've been covered by the others. But I'll go straight to the point that you made about ADB not having one evaluation manual per se, like IFAD, but having a series of them to tailor to different product lines. And you're absolutely right. So at the Asian Development Bank, because our focus, our portfolio is quite broad. We cover everything from apples to zippers, as I like to call it. So it's quite wide. And the work that we do to evaluate has to be tailored, to the various types of interventions and the levels at which the interventions are delivered. So, for instance, we think of the lowest level of aggregation as either the project or program, and we also have some technical assistance programs, so that would fall under that category. So at that level, we actually have 3 different sets of guidelines. One is just for the public sector projects, for which we use, the international criteria, and we use, the relevance, effectiveness, efficiency, and sustainability. So that's just the public sector projects. At that level, we also have quite a bit of lending to the private sector, and we use quite a different set of criteria for that, because the purpose of private sector interventions is a bit different from the interventions you make in the public sector. So for that, we look at things like additionality, specifically, both financial, non-financial. We look at investment profitability. Obviously, you don't want crowding out in the private sector, and the quality of ADB's work. And very importantly, of course, because it's a development bank, we do look at development results, right? And the other set of guidelines at that lowest level is specifically tailored towards technical assistance. And I think the focus here is quite a bit on the lessons, both on the implementation side and on the development results that emerge from them. And we don't focus that much on things like sustainability for that, because I think maybe relevance, effectiveness, efficiency makes more sense. We can sort of, leave out the other criteria. So I think this goes to the point that Megan made, that, you don't need to mechanically apply the criteria for every single intervention type. And you may need to think about it a little bit and decide what makes sense in a particular context. And besides these standard sort of guidelines, obviously, we also have other types of evaluations, sector-wide evaluations, which looks at the entire portfolio of the bank in a sector across all the countries in which it operates. We also evaluate corporate strategies, thematic priorities. So for those sets of evaluations, we don't have standard criteria. It's quite tailored, and it really depends on the issues and the objectives that are being assessed. So that's sort of the hierarchy of the collection of guidelines that we have at ADB. And I explained the reasons why, they're sort of tailored. But the important thing is the sets of guidelines, all four of them, are actually used by both the self and independent evaluation units. So in that sense, they're quite harmonized. There's just one set of guidelines that are used. And obviously, having adopted the international criteria, the other purpose of that is to really promote a harmonized approach to evaluation methodology. And I think having that standard set of criteria also helps us collaborate with IFAD, with IEG on joint evaluations. These take much longer, but I think there's a lot to be said. Simona, in fact, was involved in the most recent one that we collaborated on with IFAD, and we had one much more recently that we collaborated with the Independent Evaluation Group of the World Bank. And this is because more often than not, interventions are now co-financed by two or more partners. So it does make sense, to pool resources, and there's actually a lot more learning if you partner with another organization and implement it that way. The other point I want to make is, sure, we have all of these guidelines, they're harmonized and all of that, but I think I want to go back to the point that Nigel made in his opening remarks about the importance of having a good evaluation policy. So I think that really what underpins the effectiveness of these methodologies and guidelines. And you may also need a range of other supporting institutional documents and guidelines. So I think all of that really facilitates the use and the influence of the findings of either the self or the independent evaluations. One other really interesting mandate that my department has, which I don't believe the other multilateral development banks have, is to build evaluation capacity of not just the staff within the organization, but of our partners, of our collaborators in the countries. So I think that's a pretty important distinction. And because that's part of our mandate, we also have funding for that. And Simona knows this very well. I think she's been out when she was with ADB. She went out to Cambodia, I believe. So we have staff from the department going out to the countries and sharing our knowledge, teaching country officials how to evaluate. So I think that's a point that a colleague from Uzbekistan also made, and I think that's probably going to make our jobs easier as well. So I think that's all. I think I should stop there, and then perhaps pick up on the other question that Roxy had on nuggets. What can I say? I think this is a great manual, and it covers the why, it covers the how, and it covers the what of evaluation of rural development programs, projects, or interventions. And it also ticks all the 3 C's, as I call them. So it's clear, it's comprehensive, and it's contextualized. So, I mean, what more can you ask for, right? So I think, yeah, I think with this new manual, if there was an opportunity for us to collaborate with IFAD on another co-finance project, it's going to be a breeze, I think, for us to be, implementing both of our sets of guidelines, getting more from the joint evaluation than we'd get if we just had to do this on our own. So I think that's all I want to say. Thanks a lot for inviting me. I've learned a lot, by just listening to you.
Thank you, Maya. Well, I hope that, this manual will inspire ADB to consolidate its guidelines into its own manual. Who knows? So, maybe we'll be a trailblazer in that sense. And thank you for highlighting the fact and the value of doing these joint evaluations where, the learning is more. And I think your program of building evaluation capacity also is something very important. And well, you're lucky enough to also have the resources to do that, which is wonderful for you guys. So now I want to go back to Chitra for final questions before taking the questions from the floor. So if you have the floor, if you have questions, please put it in the Q&A box. So Chitra, as IFAD starts to roll out the manual, how is management planning to promote its use with IFAD staff and our government counterparts? Also, being inspired with what Maya just said, that they have this whole evaluation capacity and they have funds, so they have money to actually do it.
Thanks, Roxy. Yes, if we all had a large budget, that would be fantastic. But just to say that we've already started rolling out, this week, the manual to our staff in the field. And we had 2 launch events earlier this week that were virtual. So we could get our staff in Asia, as well as in Latin America, Africa, and worldwide, to know more about the evaluation manual. There'll also be, we're hoping to have other specific learning events at the regional level through different engagements like regional retreats. These will be more ad hoc, but more substantially this year, we're going to have to reflect the shared criteria as they're defined in our part 2 of the evaluation manual. And that's an updated project completion review guidelines, as well as our country strategy completion review guidelines. And that's upcoming this year. And that's really for our field staff and our government partners, where the rubber hits the road, to see how this translates into our own self-assessment products, and those are forthcoming. There is another collaboration with IOE, and in that the training on the evaluation manual is being developed and should be launched soon through our IFAD Operations Academy, and that is also a virtual e-platform. And we are developing sort of linked but separately M&E training as well on our Operations Academy, and that is open, should be open also to government partners as well as our staff in the field. And then, as already mentioned, we have the manual posted online, and that is very instructive. And we will be organizing other events for our part 1 as well as part 2 as they become available. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Chitra, for that clear rollout plan. So we now have a couple of questions. I just wanted to point out that there was one question that Simona answered. So for the person who asked that question, if you go, Pawan, if you go to the answered section, you will see the answer that Simona has provided. Now, there's one for Megan, and this is Rana. She says she's used the OECD DAC criteria, and she recently came across a reference that presented an alternative criteria that's more centered on issues on human rights empowerment, inclusion. As the author said, that the criteria doesn't specifically mention or doesn't have a gender inclusive focus. So she says, I was wondering, from your point of view, what do you think it is, and whether the criteria as is gender sensitive or not?
Yeah, thank you, Rena, for the question. And I'd also love to hear actually from the other colleagues, from Fabrizio and others that are working within the IFAD context, how you perceive this, because it was discussed, I believe, rather extensively in terms of the way gender equality is presented within the guidance. So we are currently working within the OECD DAC on a new guidance around applying a human rights and gender equality perspective using the criteria that will exactly dig into this specific question. My personal view is that these criteria actually lend themselves very well to analysis of gender equality dynamics, both in terms of assessing effectiveness and relevance, and other elements of the criteria. So what I think is really important is that the criteria are intended to be an overarching conceptual framework. And we invite partners that are using these criteria to do exactly what IFAD has done, which is to define them in a way that addresses their own priorities. So I would say you need to actually go beyond just gender equality, and we've mentioned human rights, also the focus on the furthest behind, or people that are most excluded, most vulnerable parts of the population. So just to give an example of how that's done, that's not from IFAD, the Swedish government SIDA has provided in their evaluation manual, within the section where they talk about the 6 criteria and how they're defined. They also then mention specifically that one should consider including specific evaluation of questions that address the goals of poverty reduction, and include the perspectives of poor people and the human rights-based approach, gender equality, and environmental considerations. And then they give examples for what that could look like. Now, the challenge with gender equality is that often an objective of the intervention that you're evaluating is to support improved gender equality. So it becomes tautological if we have gender equality both as an objective and as one of the criteria. So I think oftentimes it's actually better to look at to what extent did this intervention contribute or achieve its goals around gender equality as part of the effectiveness criteria, for example, or under relevance, to look at questions of, to what extent did men, women, and people of other genders benefit? Was it equally relevant to different parts of the population? And then again, as Paula mentioned, the importance of intersectionality. It's not just about gender. So I think in different contexts where you should focus, the questions around differential results, different perspectives of relevance will be different. So that's why we have not provided at the level of the OECD. We don't provide specific guidelines on that, because we think it's actually better done at the level of individual institutions and partners that are working, so that they can prioritize the topics that they think are most important. So I know there's lots of different views on this question of how well suited the criteria themselves are. But my advice also to IFAD was that, if the only place that you're really worried about gender equality is in the evaluation criteria, that seems to me to be a huge problem, right? So this really should be a strategic policy priority of IFAD. It should be integrated throughout every program's design. It should be integrated throughout program approval and funding processes and implementation. And if it is done properly, it will very naturally also be a huge focus of evaluation. Otherwise, you have the evaluation criteria being the tail trying to wag the dog, right? So you need to have it front and center at the start, so that then it comes in and it will then flow very naturally, I think, from the evaluation criteria.
Thank you, Megan. Now we have a question from Carla Ferreira, who's actually an ex-colleague. So she's asking, she'd be interested to hear whether and how we're integrating learning from self-evaluation and independent evaluation into quality assurance. So Chitra, I know you answered it and you were doing it as I was asking the question. So do you want to just briefly just give the gist of your answer?
Yeah, yes, no, quickly. Great question, Carla. Thanks for joining us. And just to say that, yes, through SELF, we have a kind of an operational results management system in IFAD called ORMS, and there we have all of our self-evaluations are in that system, and part of it we have a new element of that where we have our lessons. We have a lessons learned section where, so basically through that system, it more easily and readily our IFAD staff are able to glean these lessons from our assessments and our learnings in order to apply them to our new designs. And then, as you may recall, just as a quick example, is in our country strategies, we have a very engaging process between the independent evaluation and our project teams and our IFAD teams. And at the end of, throughout there are engagements, but also at the end, we have our stakeholder workshop where the findings are presented and discussed to really understand the findings and the recommendations. And then it's more formalized in the agreement at completion. And just to say that in that agreement at completion, there's a very clear point where management agrees with the different recommendations. Now, this document is then part of our whole review process in terms of whether the new strategy is taking this up, is taken into account through our quality assurance process. So it's a fundamental document that's submitted and then discussed. Were the lessons learned taken? Were they appropriately addressed in the new strategy before it goes forward? So this is how that's addressed. So thanks for the question.
Thank you, everybody. And Scott, I understand you got your reply in the chat. So we have now finished all the questions in the Q&A section. Thank you very much for a lively conversation and for your very good questions. So this brings us to the end of the panel discussion. And now it's my pleasure to give the floor to Sara Savastano, Director of Research Impact Assessment Division, to deliver her closing remarks. Sara, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Roxana, and thank you for moderating this very interesting session. Thank you to all the participants for attending to this important event and this important week. So a few words of reflection. As you know, as it has been mentioned at least 4 or 5 times, I think that this evaluation manual is a unique manual because it represents the joint effort of the Independent Office of Evaluation and of Ifad Management. So the staff of United Nations Agency, IFI, International Financial Institution, and the Independent Office of Evaluation. And why this is important? For 2 main reasons. First of all, because it wouldn't have been possible, as Maya was saying, if we didn't have the joint evaluation policy approved maybe a little bit more than a year ago. And this is the example of rapid implementation. We had the policy and we have implemented. The policy was a joint policy, namely of collaboration between IOE and management, and we have implemented it with the manual. Why the manual is important? The manual is important because, for example, for a newcomer, understanding who is doing what. So the manual tells what are we doing, why are we doing, and how we're doing it independently, but with the spirit of collaboration. And for this reason, it's very important. And maybe not everybody knows who is doing what within an institution. If you join an institution, that's how you start learning how the work is organized. A few couple of reflections from management side, and in particular from the Research and Impact Assessment Division that I have and the knowledge department that I have, that is in the strategy and knowledge department of IFAD. As you might know, the Research and Impact Assessment Division conduct the corporate impact assessment, the one that allows to measure the impact that the IFAD project had on our beneficiaries. We conduct those impact assessments to ensure transparency, accountability, and learning, and to improve our operation, the design of new projects and programs. Within this framework, I would like to emphasize two important aspects. First of all, that IFAD uses a unique approach for corporate reporting using rigorous impact assessment to measure development effectiveness. This remains a unique characteristic of IFAD, setting it apart from other IFI and UN or multilateral agencies. For each replenishment period, we are able to estimate the causal impact that IFAD generated on small-scale producer. And this provides important lessons for IFAD and for the international community as a whole, because we're able to contribute to the global narrative on achieving sustainable development goals. Second, you all know the importance of monitoring and evaluation. We're launching the concept of monitoring for evaluation, which has been established in IFAD thanks to the harmonization effort between the core outcome indicators collected in the framework of our MME and the impact assessment. Monitoring for evaluation aims to create a monitoring system that facilitates rigorous evaluation for all our projects, not only on the 15% of the sample that we use to conduct our impact assessment. IFAD has been ranked as the top development cooperation among 49 institutions by the Center for Global Development in their Quality of Official Development Assistance, Quality of ODA, ranking last year. This was based on an assessment of 4 distinct dimensions: prioritization, ownership, transparency, and unity and evaluation. The quality of ODA ranking specific to IFAD evaluation dimension places IFAD as the 4th development cooperation in terms of quality of providing learning and evaluation system. With this new manual, again, jointly released and produced by IOE and Ifad Management, we are strengthening the evaluation function of IFAD and strengthening synergies among various evaluation products by IOE and management. The innovative approach of the new evaluation manual incorporates both and self-evaluation, make it a unique contribution to the success of IFAD's strong imprimatur in evaluation. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you very much, Sarah. May I now ask Indra Naidu to deliver his closing remarks and to officially close the event.
Thank you very much, and to thank all the participants, the members of the panel, and a very large turnout from across the globe. Clearly, this manual is going to have an important impact on not only improving transparency and accountability, but also learning across IFAD that includes the member states and all the various partners. I want to thank the members of the panel for the excellent inputs, also to appreciate the members who have asked very pertinent questions, and to assure everyone that this is only the beginning of a long journey. We now need to socialize the manual and actually put it into practice so that we are able to get better development results measured in order that we can improve on the learning element. So with that, a few short words. We look forward to seeing you in other forums as this moves along. Particularly thankful to Megan, who I must mention, who I've worked in a previous iteration and the NEC conference, where we were constantly talking about criteria, and it's now actually come a long way on those various meetings, going way back from Istanbul and then to Egypt and finally this. So it is global, it's important, and thank you very much. And I officially close the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Indra, and I hope everybody in this virtual room benefited from this inspiring and informative conversation. And I hope that as you go back to your desks, you can actually put it to use and act upon it. So thank you all for your time, and have a wonderful evening, afternoon, or rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much, colleagues.
Bye.
Thanks, Petra. Thanks. Thank you,
Thank
Maya.
you.
And
Hi, thanks.
see
Thank
you
you
all.
very much.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Roxanne, as always, energizing the event. Really helps. Simona.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roxanne.
Thank you
Brava,
very much.
brava, Roxanne.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
everybody.
thanks,
Thank
Chitra,
you.
and thanks, CCU, the other panelists, Maya, Megan, Paula, and thanks also to Mr. Shukurov, and also thanks obviously to Roxy, but also thanks to the evaluation
Communication
communication unit.
Yeah, absolutely. They
Sarah,
always do a
Grecia,
remarkable job.
Alexander,